Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Stephanie.
And I am Tom, and today we're going to continue talking about Johnny got his gun, facing the horror of war. Last time we were talking about the author himself, James Dalton Trumbo. He got in trouble for writing this book because he was kind of showing people the horrors of war. And the government of the United States thought, that means you're not patriotic. That means you're trying to undermine our efforts to fight those bad commies, the Russians. They're our enemies. So he was blacklisted in Hollywood, and he had to spend a year in jail. But today we're going to talk about the actual novel itself as to what it's talking about and why we think you should read it.
That's right. That means day 3, we're going to talk about the themes in the novel and explain a little bit more about what the author might have meant when he wrote certain passages or what he really wanted to communicate, at least as far as we can interpret. We're going to go ahead and read through the lesson, and then we'll be back.
Johnny Got His Gun remains relevant as it captures the horrific side of war that few people want to face. The title comes from a line in a famous patriotic American war song, Over There, which encourages a soldier named Johnny to get his gun and fight in the war. By changing the title to the past tense, Trumbo cleverly suggests that the optimistic attitude and fervor for war in the song should be reconsidered. In the novel, after Joe finally gets his gun, his life falls apart. In the war, Joe loses his limbs and is robbed of all his senses. Trumbo is also critical of the true intentions of modern warfare. Joe, like Trumbo, comes from a working-class background, and his family struggles to scrape by. Joe's plight is an example of how the poor are exploited and treated unfairly by governments and the privileged classes of society. Yet it is the poor and oppressed who are called on to sacrifice their lives when war breaks out. Meanwhile, the sons and daughters of politicians and the wealthy who orchestrated the war are never called on to fight in battles themselves. The concept of wartime propaganda is also a main theme throughout the novel. As Joe lies in his hospital bed, he has time to reflect on why he decided to join the army. He concludes that he was influenced by the media, which suggested he fight for important ideals such as liberty, democracy, and justice. However, it finally dawned on Joe that it was not his freedom he was fighting for, but the freedom of a select few. In return for making the ultimate sacrifice for his nation, Joe gets a worthless medal. At the end of the novel, the military even refuses Joe's request to meet with the general public. This denial of his freedom of expression symbolizes that once a soldier has served his purpose, he is of little use to those in power.
Okay, guys, let's talk about some of the themes that our author wanted to include in his novel, Johnny Got His Gun. It says here, it remains relevant. Remember, this book was published back in 1939. That was a long time ago, and the world has changed quite a bit. But sometimes themes in novels and books, they're timeless, you could say. It says here that it remains relevant, or it means it's closely connected or appropriate to today's world. We can still learn a lot from it. It still has relevance. That's the noun form of this adjective, relevant. And it captures the horrific side of war. We're still seeing horrible consequences of war. Of course, the whole world seems to be in a mess right now. Horrific is the adjective form of horrible or horrifying. So there's a horrible side of war that we never see if we never go out onto the battlefield. Except though, when the soldiers come back, those veterans, we often see how injured they are. They're usually, not usually, but a lot of them are disabled. They've lost legs, arms. They've been damaged. Their brains have been damaged from bombs, things like that.
Yep, and so, yes, indeed, we can see the horrific side of war. Probably before that, we didn't really know it too much. Few people want to face the horrors of this. We don't want to know about your missing leg or the fact that you lost your hearing because of shell shock or things like that. We want to hear about the glory and the honor and the victories and how you blew the enemy away. You blew them off the face of the earth. That's what we want to hear about. But anyway, the next sentence here says, the title of the novel, Johnny Got His Gun, comes from a line in a famous patriotic American war song entitled Over There, which encourages a soldier named Johnny to get his gun and fight in the war. And as I was doing research for our lesson today, I wanted to figure out what this song was, Over There. I thought it was another song, Over Here, Over There, as we hit the dusty trail. But it's actually not that song. It's something else. And this particular song I had never heard before, but I guess it was famous in this period of history around World War I. They were trying to get American men to sign up, to enlist and fight in the war, so this song came out. It was a song to express your love for your country, and that's what being patriotic means, to love your country, to sing those songs and make your sacrifices for your country.
That's right. Patriotic is the adjective form of this word. The noun form is patriotism. So if you're patriotic, like Tom says, you love your country, you think your country is great, and you're always positive and encouraging about your country. Now, by changing the title to the past tense, notice it's Johnny to get his gun. Johnny get his gun is the present tense. Johnny got his gun is the past tense. By changing it to the past tense, he cleverly suggests that the optimistic attitude and fervor for war in the song should be reconsidered. They should rethink this and consider it again. Is it really such a good thing to go to war? Optimistic. If someone's optimistic, they're very positive. I grew up with one of the most optimistic people on the planet, and that is my father. He thinks everything's great. He's very positive. Even when things are bad, he looks for the positive. My mom was more realistic. So if you're optimistic, you're very hopeful and confident about the future. You don't complain a lot at all. People who complain are not optimistic usually. Now, if you have a fervor for something, you have a very strong and intense, passionate feeling for something. So Trumbo was saying, hey, maybe we need to rethink our optimistic attitudes and this passionate feeling for war. It's not so great. Look at our soldiers coming home. They've been severely damaged, disabled, and hurt.
Yeah, some come back with glory. They come back in one piece, but other ones they're maimed and they've lost limbs and they're going to be suffering pain for the rest of their lives, or some of them are even dead. So yes, indeed, he's asking us to question the glory of war. And in the novel, after Joe, the main character, finally gets his gun, his life falls apart, which means basically everything in his life goes wrong. It falls apart. And in the war, Joe loses his limbs, which of course are your arms and legs, and he is robbed of all his senses. If you're robbed of something, basically you lose what you should have. They've been taken away from you against your will. So his senses, of course, are his sight, his hearing, and his sense of smell and taste. But I think he can still feel. So at least he's got that.
I don't know. Can he feel? You mean,
yeah, I was going to say because I was wondering.
He doesn't have any hands.
True, but the rest of his body might have some sort of sensation, which could be good and bad.
Oh.
If he still has this sense of feeling or sense of touch, that means he can probably feel all the pain from his missing limbs, etc. But in that way, though, it might be a way for people to communicate with him, maybe by touching him or, tapping on his skin in Morse code as a way to communicate back. And
so
remember,
what you're saying is he's not paralyzed.
Well, obviously not, because he can move his neck and bang his head on the pillow.
That's good.
To communicate in Morse code. So not all is lost.
Well, it says here in the next paragraph that he's also critical of the true intentions of modern warfare. What are their true goals, their true motivation? The motivations or their intentions are why they're doing something. what are your true intentions? For example, you might see a guy dating this girl and think, what does he really want out of that relationship? Especially if you see him dating several girls at the same time. So your intention is the thing you intend on doing. It's your aim, your goal, your plan. So he was critical or very negative about their true intentions of modern warfare. Warfare is just the word we use when we're talking about war and what goes on in war, modern warfare. You could also say true intentions of modern war, but warfare is more formal.
Indeed, and Joe, like Trumbo, comes from a working-class background, so Joe is actually a blue-collar person, and his family struggles to scrape by. To scrape by here is similar to an earlier phrase we used, to make ends meet. To scrape usually means you take some kind of hard object and you pull it over a surface, like an ice scraper, which is a tool we use in northern climates to get rid of the ice and the snow that's on our car windshield. We won't be able to see unless we scrape it off. To scrape it off. And here, if you scrape by, that means basically you make just enough money to survive, but not much, and you're probably working all the time.
Yeah, we also use scrape to talk about getting things off, maybe a sidewalk, maybe there's a piece of gum, and you can't really pull it off easily. So you have to use something that's hard and sharp to kind of go across that surface to remove that thing. If you scrape by, you can also use it in more of a figurative way. Maybe you got really bad grades your first year in college and you managed to scrape by. They didn't kick you out entirely. So if you barely are able to do something, sometimes we'll use that phrase to scrape by. Joe's plight or his situation, your plight is sort of a negative situation that someone is in. Their circumstances are pretty bad. His plight is an example of how the poor are exploited and treated unfairly by governments and the privileged classes of society, the rich. Now, if you're exploited, it means people use you for their own purposes. They don't care about you. They're not interested in you and your needs. It's very unfair to be exploited. So they make full use of you. They use you in an unfair situation. And a lot of times the poor are exploited by those who know they don't have any other options or choices.
Exploit can be good and bad. Like the company is trying to exploit the new technology, for example.
Yeah.
But oftentimes when we do see this word exploit, it kind of has a negative meaning. So yes, the poor are being exploited, or children or women are being exploited, etc. In this case, he's saying that poor people are exploited. They're just used as soldiers, as pawns for rich people and big government and stuff like that. They're also treated unfairly by these governments and also by the privileged classes of society. If you're privileged, that means you have special rights, you have special advantages, and in some cases, you don't have to obey the laws that everybody else does. So yes, you're privileged here. These are different classes of society. The rich, the merchants, those are different classes of society. Yet, still, it is the poor and oppressed who are called on to sacrifice their lives when war breaks out. So yes, it's the poor people who have to bear the burden of war. They are oppressed, which means they are basically kept under control and they're usually not treated well. We could say black people are the oppressed in the United States, for example. They're still not doing as well as other races or different classes of people. And indeed, the oppressed and the poor are called on, or basically ordered, to sacrifice their lives when war starts to happen, when it breaks out.
Yeah. In our earlier lesson, we used break out as a noun. Here it's a verb phrase, break out. Okay, guys, we're going to take a quick break now, listen to our Chinese teacher, and then we'll be back.
大家好，我是 Trevor， 欢迎收听 English Digest。今天我们要阅读的文章是 Unit15 文学单元的第3天课程。在今天的课程里，我们将深入探讨小说《强尼上战场》的创作背景，以及小说想要传达的重要意义。文章的第一段提到，小说的书名是改编于一首爱国战争歌曲，作者刻意用过去式来书写这个书名，用意是要提醒读者，对于爱国歌曲中对战争的热情和乐观，应该重新的检讨和反省。我们看到第一段的 By changing the title to the past tense， Trumbull cleverly suggests that the optimistic attitude and fervor for war in the song should be reconsidered. 借由把书名改成过去式，杜伦波巧妙地暗示在这首歌里对战争的乐观态度和狂热应该要被重新检视。我们看到本句的一个动词 suggest S-U-G-G-E-S-T suggest 有两个不同的意思，也有两个不同的用法。在本句中 suggest 是暗示、表示的意思，其后可接 that 名词子句。 that 子句里用陈述语气即可，也就是发生的时间是现在，就用现在式；发生的时间是过去，就用过去式，并不一定要用 should 加原形动词。例如 Mary's angry face suggests that she hasn't forgiven me yet. 玛丽生气的脸表示她还没有原谅我。我们先跳到文章的最后一段，看一下 suggest 的另一个用法。我们看到最后一段的第三句 He concludes that he was influenced by the media, which suggested he fight for important ideals such as liberty, democracy, and justice. 本句的 suggest 是建议、提议的意思，其后可加 that 名词子句。而这里 that 名词子句里面会用假设语气，也就是用 should 加原形动词。should 可以省略，只留下原形动词。这个用法是说明建议某人做某事，但是还没有做，所以用假设语气。本例句的 fight 前面便是省略了 should。例如 Jenny suggested that her friend should watch this movie. 珍妮建议她的朋友看这部电影。此句里的 should 可以省略，只留下 watch 即可。类似这样用法的动词还有很多，例如 insist I-N-S-I-S-T 坚持， demand D-E-M-A-N-D 要求， request R-E-Q-U-E-S-T 是要求， advise A-D-V-I-S-E 建议， recommend R-E-C-O-M-M-E-N-D 提议等等。最后要注意的是 suggest 并没有 suggest somebody to do something 的用法，应该将 suggest 改成 advise 才对，也就是 advise somebody to do something。 例如 My father advises me to save some money for a rainy day. 我父亲建议我存钱以备不时之需。文章的第二段提到作者杜伦波对战争本质的批判，认为战争实际上是由少数掌权者所操纵，却牺牲穷人和被压迫者的性命。我们看到文章第二段的倒数第二句 Yet it is the poor and oppressed who are called on to sacrifice their lives when war breaks out. 然而当战争爆发时，也正是穷人和受压迫者会被征召去牺牲他们的性命。本句使用了强调句型，也可以说是分裂句型，那就是 it is ... that ... 将句子所要强调的部分放在 is 和 that 的中间，强调的部分通常是主词、受词、时间或地点，再将句子剩余的部分放在 that 后面。如果强调的部分是人， that 可以换成 who， 如果是事物可以换成 which， 如果是地点可以换成 where， 如果是时间则换成 when。 例如 It is the executive that who deserves our respect. 正是这名主管值得我们的尊敬。It is John's proposal that which we consider feasible. 我们觉得可行的正是约翰的提案。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Okay, guys, we're back. We're learning about some of the themes in this book. We know that Trumbo wrote this book to kind of let people know that sometimes war isn't all positive and great. He wanted to point out that sometimes it's really bad, especially towards our soldiers who have to go over there and fight. And typically when there's a draft or people even enlist, when they have a choice, we find that mostly the poorer classes of people sign up or are drafted because a lot of times the privileged classes of society, they find some way to get out of it. So they don't have to go over there and fight. And during a time of enlistment, very few actually sign up to fight in the war because there are other choices, like they could go to dental school or become a lawyer or something like that.
Yeah, that's a prime example. During the Vietnam War, of course, they said that if you're going to college or something, then you don't have to fight in war.
That's not fair.
And, of course, only people who are privileged could afford that. Hopefully they've changed that now so college students can go to war if everybody gets drafted. But in any case here, we're talking about orchestrating a war, which kind of has to do with a symphony orchestra. Somebody there has to organize all this stuff, and there are all sorts of different instruments in an orchestra. They have to play together. And so here, orchestrate does mean to arrange something rather big and complicated, but usually it kind of means it's in a bad way or for a bad purpose. Orchestrating this scandal, who orchestrated this, who thought of this and made all the arrangements. So yes, indeed, the wealthy people or the privileged people who orchestrated this war, they get off the hook. They don't have to fight in these battles. They just stay home and comfortable in their expensive apartments on Madison Avenue. Well, now moving on to the next the next paragraph here. It says, the concept of wartime propaganda is also a main theme throughout the novel. So this is propaganda, which is basically a bunch of information that is sent out oftentimes so that you can support your country. There's, of course, lots of propaganda in North Korea. We love our great leader. There's these posters everywhere.
Right.
We're going to destroy our sworn enemy, the Americans. There used to be a lot of propaganda in mainland China, too.
Yes.
And I think there used to be quite a lot of propaganda here in Taiwan when Chiang Kai-shek was in power here, but probably not as much as in mainland China.
Well, the concept of wartime propaganda is also a main theme throughout the novel. What he's talking about here is that sometimes the governments tell the citizens how to view something, how to think of war. And I know in World War II, the government was very positive about it. They wanted the public to get behind the war. And there was a lot of positive feelings about fighting in World War II, especially after the Japanese attacked us on Pearl Harbor. Americans got behind the war. Before that, a lot of Americans were thinking, hey, it's over in Europe again. Doesn't have anything to do with us. But once your own homeland is attacked, people usually change sides. So propaganda, again, is just sort of like a group. Here we're talking about the government or wealthy people trying to convince others that they should support something. They're trying to promote something. And sometimes they're not always honest. As Joe lies in the hospital bed, he has time to reflect on why he decided to join the army. He had a lot of time to think because he couldn't communicate with others around him. He was sort of just in his own head, you could say. So he decided, well, you know what? I was really influenced by the media. The media got me to sign up and want to fight for the war. It's their fault. They suggested the fight was for important ideals, important principles like liberty, freedom. That's freedom, which is very important to Americans, more so than any other country in the world. We love our freedom. Democracy, where people get to have a say in their government, and justice. We want things to be fair.
With liberty and justice for all, and of course democracy. And he saw all this propaganda in the media. He probably saw that poster of Uncle Sam pointing at you and saying, I want you to join the U.S. Army. He fell for it. And however, it finally dawned on Joe, or he finally realized this, that it was not his freedom he was fighting for, but the freedom of a select few. Select here means something that is carefully chosen, okay? Special selection here, a select few. He's not fighting for his own freedom. He's fighting for the freedom of greedy capitalists. They're just going to stay home back in New York or California, and they're going to be sipping their pina coladas, and while he's going to be suffering in the trenches in Germany or in France there. And so he realized that, hey, this isn't for me. It's for them, those privileged few.
Yeah, so when something dawns on you, it's all of a sudden, oh, Yeah, I get it. So it took him a while, but he suddenly realized it was not his freedom he was fighting for, but the freedom of those who were orchestrating the war. So in return for something is just an exchange you make. So what's the exchange? Well, in return for making the ultimate sacrifice for his nation, usually the ultimate sacrifice refers to someone's death. They made the ultimate sacrifice. If you see that, you know someone died. Here it's almost like he gave up his life because he no longer really has much of a life at all.
Yeah, he probably got the Purple Heart here. It's a worthless medal because it was injured, but...
So that's the exchange. He gave up really his life for this worthless medal.
Yep, in return for this sacrifice, he got this worthless medal. That's not much of a deal, is it? And at the end of the novel, the military even refuses Joe's request to meet with the general public. So he asked this, hey, can I let people see me and let them know about the horrors of war? They said, nope, it's against regulations.
I think nowadays he could use social media to do that.
Yeah, he can just go past them. He can go over their head.
Yeah. Now, this denial of his freedom of expression, which is important to Americans, believe me, symbolizes that once a soldier has served his purpose, done what he was asked to do, he is of little use to those in power, which is a very cynical viewpoint. Now, denial means the action of saying, hey, something's untrue, or saying no, or refusing or denying. Refusing is very close to this, right? His refusal, denial. This refusal or denial, very, very close. Just meant that, hey, once you've gone out there and served, but now you're disabled, you're of no value to us.
Yep, you've already served your purpose. You're no longer useful. You're useless. Get out of here. And that's kind of how the book ends. I guess that means it doesn't have a happy ending, but hey, that's how things are. What's all fair is in war? All fair in war and love, or how's it go?
All is fair in love and war.
There you go. Yeah, I couldn't think. All is fair in love and war, so that's what happens. I don't know if you believe that or not, but what I believe right now is that we need to listen to our Chinese teacher.
文章的最后一段提到媒体对战争的宣传扮演重要的角色。书中的主角乔之所以会参加战争，便是因为媒体的宣传，让他误以为参战是为了自己的自由和梦想而奋斗。但当他的要求被军方拒绝时，他才了解战争的残忍本质。士兵一旦被利用完，没有办法再作战了，对掌权者而言就没有任何价值了。我们看到最后一段的 However, it finally dawned on Joe that it was not his freedom he was fighting for, but the freedom of a select few. 然而，乔终于明白他所奋战的并非他的自由，而是精心挑选的少数人之自由。我们看到本句的一个动词片语 down on， 此片语必须以事物为主词，以人为受词。Something down on somebody 就是某人想到某事的意思，就相当于 occur to O-C-C-U-R come to strike S-T-R-I-K-E 例如 The fact that today was a holiday occurred to John when he saw the calendar 当约翰看到日历时，他想起今天是假日。如果想起的事情是一整件事，可以用 it 做虚主词，真正的主词用 that 子句来引导，放在后面，也就是 it dawns on somebody that 主词加动词。例如 Several hours had passed before it dawned on Peter why his girlfriend was angry 几个小时过去了，彼得才想到为何他的女朋友在生气。以上就是今天的课程，谢谢收听。
Thanks for joining us, guys. We hope you learned a lot through our literature unit. More about Johnny Got His Gun, the author Trumbo himself. We hope you get a chance to see the film that Bryan Cranston was nominated for an Oscar. And, you know, pick this book up. It'll give you a different viewpoint, or maybe it matches your own viewpoint of war. For English Digest, I'm Stephanie.
I'm Tom. Goodbye.
Bye.